Although his Kansas City Royals won 3 division titles in the 1970s, it's as a St. Louis Cardinal that Whitey Herzog enters the Hall of Fame. His run in Redbirds won 3 pennants in the 1980s and the 1982 World Championship. And so tonight, on Studio 42 from Cooperstown, one of the game's greatest strategists and most colorful personalities, the White Rat, new Hall of Famer, Whitey Herzog.
Whitey, let me ask you about your team and give me a one-word answer. Pitching.
Our pitching's underrated, very good.
Swing and a miss, he struck him out!
Infield.
I don't think anybody can play defense with us.
Sparkling defensive play by Ozzie Smith.
Team speed.
Best in baseball.
He is safe and the Cardinals win!
He ran a farm system at one time. He coached in the major leagues. He managed. Absolutely need people like Whitey Herzog in the Hall of Fame. One of my favorites.
Whitey was the best manager I ever played for, without a doubt.
And the Cardinals are still in first place.
He got the most out of every one of the teams that he managed, but more than anything else, he was a tremendous competitor. He hated to lose.
He always had that look of wanting to beat the other team, and I admired that.
That's a winner! And they've won the Eastern Division.
We played an exciting, what I consider to be an exciting form of baseball. Hit and run, bunts, steals.
The squeeze play, it's a beauty.
And Whitey just kind of put it all together.
He built the team around speed, defense, and pitching, and he sort of crafted it for Busch Stadium, and it paid off.
A swing and a miss, and that's a winner! That's a winner! A World Series winner for the Cardinals!
Well, I just don't know what to say. It's just hit me kind of quick here, and we're very happy about it, and just that we could bring a World Championship to St. Louis, and for the greatest guy in the world, Mr. Busch.
And here is new Hall of Famer Whitey Herzog. I don't think anybody in the history of the game has held more important jobs that give you a sense of the game from all the different perspectives that you have. Tell me if I'm missing one. Player, manager, coach, third base coach, which is important, director of player development or farm director, scout, and general manager. That's a half dozen really important positions. I don't think anybody has that exact resume, except you.
The job I loved the most was coaching third base. I really do think I was the best third base coach ever lived.
You just said it. I once heard you say you're the best third base coach who ever lived. Why?
Oh, I was aggressive, and you had the airport next door, and you couldn't holler anything. You had to act out everything.
The airport next to Shea Stadium.
Yeah, right. And the airplane's going over for 5 minutes, so I just had to get on my belly when I wanted to slide, and I'd go almost down the home plate and get them. I got to say that the one thing that I was the best at was third base coach. You know why I loved it? Because you're in the game, and you're giving everything, relaying everything from the manager. You're telling every ball player to anticipate this, anticipate that, and you holler over it first. You say yes, and I really enjoyed coaching third base.
And the Mets were also, at that time, so lousy that you probably figured, we'll take our chances. Even if he's likely to be out, there's a better chance they botch the play than that the next guy gets a hit.
Well, I know what Casey said to me in spring training. Don Hefner coached third base for the Mets, and everybody, the New York press especially, and the New York press was very good to me. And he said, Casey said, well, what are you going to do about them 1,200 strikeouts? And I said, I'm sending everybody home. So I run them home. 2 outs, they all went. 1 out, 95% of them went, and then of course I used my judgment with no outs as I figured. But there's no sense stopping a guy at third base when you get that many strikeouts, or a guy struck out 150 times, because he's going to die there. So I'd rather take a chance on the outfielder's arm than the guy making contact.
Eventually, you get your first big league managing job with a terrible team. Now, you'd played with some lousy teams. You'd been with the Kansas City A's. You'd been with the Washington Senators. Also a little bit of time with the Yankees and Tigers when they were good. But you knew what it was like to be with crummy teams. But this was a god-awful team.
I had about 4 managerial offers, 2 from Cleveland and 2 from Oakland. And I almost took the Oakland job until Charlie was calling me, driving me crazy. I was down in the instructional league, and finally one night, he said something to me that what Charlie wants, Charlie gets. And I said, Charlie, I think you made my mind up for me. I said, I don't think I'm going to take it. And he said, well, who would you hire? And I said, Dick Williams. I pick up the St. Petersburg Times the next day. Dick Williams was the manager, and he won those World Championships. I had already hired the coaches.
So you passed on the A's dynasty, handed it off to Dick Williams, and went to manage this ragtag bunch in Texas.
That's right. Now, here's why I took Texas job. Ted Williams and I played against Ted for 6 years. And Ted Williams always thought I should have really been a good hitter because I did have a good swing, and just like Paul Richards did. And I'd go into Boston, and Ted would get me back to the screen and talk hitting. And I'd leave there, I'd be in the darn slump for 30 days, you ever seen. He had me so messed up in the head because you got to take a fastball to see how hard he throws. And, you know, I needed everything I could get, man. It was close. I had a hack at it. I'll never forget a game I was playing in Boston, and Charlie Berry was behind the plate, and I was leading off for Washington. And I walked in the first inning, third inning, fifth inning, and seventh inning, 4 walks, and no one in history ever had 5 walks in a 9-inning game that was not intentional, at least one. I get up in the 9th inning. Tom Brewer's pitches, and had a very good curveball. And he throws a curveball in the dirt, and Charlie called me out. Well, Williams hits at the inning before, and he's got 2 strikes in the ball, and Pedro Ramos threw one right down the pipe. Couldn't have been middle of the plate, and then he called the ball. So Charlie calls me out, and he's strike 3, and I said, Charlie, you know you guys trouble. I said, you give Williams 5 strikes, and me 2. It should be the other way around. I should get to 5 strikes, and Ted should get 2.
Whitey Herzog on the postseason battles between his Royals and the Yankees. Next on Studio 42, presented by Travelers. So you're managing the Texas Rangers. Their owner, Bob Short, says, you're my guy. You're the guy. Couldn't have a better manager. Next thing you know, he cans your butt and hires Billy Martin.
Yeah, that was on September 6th, 1973. Called me up to the office to announce that Joe Burke, the general manager, was going to Kansas City to be the general manager there. And he asked me, he said, you're the best manager I ever had. Well, he only had me and Ted. September 8th is Sunday morning. I'm sitting in the dugout. Here comes Bob Short. Nice fellow. Had no idea what winning was all about. No plan to win, just tried to make a fast buck. Ruined David Clyde by keeping him in the big leagues. There's no sense. He 2 starts. He was supposed to go back. He wouldn't send him back because he did pitch well, and he backed the house. And he's standing there with me talking, and he said, Detroit just fired Billy Martin. And he said, well, I'd fire my grandmother to hire Billy Martin. So I went from the best manager I ever had, and 2 days later, I was his grandmother.
Turns out okay when Texas gives you the boot, because before long, you wind up in Kansas City. And you get a good ball club there, and you play a style, partly because of your personality and your approach, partly because you got a big ballpark with artificial turf, a style different than almost any other team in the American League, a National League style in the American League.
The first year when I took over, I think we were 15 games back, and we finished 56-41, and we got within 3 games of Oakland, and we still had 6 games to play. We went to Oakland, and we lost 15 innings on an error, and kind of got us out of the race. We won 92. The next year, we defeated Oakland, the first time Kansas City ever won anything. Lost to the Yankees, and Chambliss' home run in the 9th inning of the 5th game.
Yeah, let me jump in here. You lost 3 straight LCSs in the 70s to the Yankees, 76, 77, 78. Yankees won 2 of the 3 World Series that they then went on to win. All 3 of those LCSs were very close. And maybe, like the 77 team that won 102 games, that might have been the best team in baseball that year, but you just barely lost the LCS.
So Whitey Herzog goes to the ace to nail it down. It'll be the first pennant ever for Kansas City, and Whitey Herzog is shooting the works.
We get to the 9th inning, and we got a 3-2 lead. And I bring in Dennis Leonard, who had 2 days rest, to start the inning, not to come in a jam, but because I thought Dennis was my best pitcher. The Yankees got two blue hits, seeing eye dog to center field in there, and we get beat 5-3.
Bouncing ball, Nettles goes to Randolph, 1 over to first, in time, double play, the ball game is over, the Yankees win the American League pennant.
Well, the next year, the pitching just wasn't good enough. We didn't win 2 games in a row in September, and finished 3 games out. And I went quail hunting the next morning with George Brett at a reserve. That's why we could go. And he said, what do you think is going to happen? I said, tomorrow morning, he knew I had to meet with Joe Burke. I said, I'm going to get fired. I said, meet me at Meadowbrook at 12. I'll play golf with you. So that's what happened. But I enjoyed the 5 years there. The fans loved me. I lived 2.5 miles from the ballpark. I had a good job till my players messed it up.
Coming up next, it's one of the most infamous blown calls ever, and Whitey Herzog's club was on the wrong side of it.
I said, Don, did Todd miss first base? He said, no, he beat it.
You're watching Studio 42, presented by Travelers. A couple of real quick things I'm going to bring Ozzie in. What's the maddest you ever were with an umpire?
Boy. You know, Doug Harvey's going in with me, and Doug was a good umpire. But he kicked me out of more games in 10 years in the National League than all the other umpires combined. Well, the maddest I ever got an umpire was in New York. Fernandez was warming up for them, and I had Rick Horton pitching for us a night game. Pouring down, raining. And Doug's umpiring chief, and they come out, and it is pouring down. And Fernandez comes in from the bullpen, and he said, let's play. And Doug says, let's play. We start the game in a downpour. And I mean, by the fourth inning, the field is so muddy that its game is 1-1, and McRain's pitching, and he slips on the mound and throws the ball on the screen. Now we're down 2-1. And I can't stand it anymore. I'm afraid somebody's going to get hurt. Now we're behind because the field's unplayable. I went out and I said, Doug, please, just stop the game till the rain stops, and we'll resume the game. He said to me, you're only out here because you're behind. I said, well, why do you think I'm behind? My pitcher just slipped on the mound, threw the ball against the screen. Well, you know, I don't hold that against him, but he had no right to say that because, you know, I was right and he was wrong, and he knew it. But anyway, he wanted to get to 5 innings. And that's not right. You can't play the game when it's unplayable. And kicked me out, and we end up taking a lead. And then we blew the lead late. The Mets beat us, but we had a chance to win it. But when he said to me, I'm only out there because you're behind, it just hit me the wrong way. And I probably was as mad at umpires as I've ever been in my life. I've had a good relationship with umpires. I think part of that because I was an ABL official. I worked pro basketball, and I worked a lot of college basketball. And until I took 12-month jobs in baseball where I was in Puerto Rico or down in Latin America, I really enjoyed refereeing. It's just a lot tougher now than it was then, though.
Obviously, the most famous run-in that people remember because they replay the clip all the time is you arguing the call with Denkinger, and he himself realized shortly after that he'd missed the call.
Little squibber to the right side. Worrell races over to cover. The throw doesn't get him. Worrell got to the bag, and an argument here, and here comes Herzog amongst the other quartet.
You knew he was a good umpire. He'd been an American League umpire. You'd been with the Royals. You knew he was a good umpire. You said that immediately after. And then I remember a few years ago was the 20th anniversary of that Cardinal team, and you invited him to come speak to the reunion.
You know, he was very gracious, and Dave Phillips kind of lined it up for me, the umpire, American League umpire for here, good friends. He and his wife came down, wonderful people. I had managed the Royals, you know, for 5 years, 5+, and Denkinger was really a young umpire, a very good one. I don't think I really ever got kicked out by him or really ever had a heated argument with him. That's how good he was. And when I went out there that night after the call was blown, I remember I said, Don, did Todd miss first base? He said, no, he beat it. I said, well, I can tell from third base dugout he didn't beat it. I said, no, that's ridiculous. If we'd had instant replay there and they could have got it right, that would have changed the World Series around. They're talking about the perfect game. I would have granted that perfect game as I was a commissioner because it didn't have anything to do with the game. They know it was a mistake made. Give it to him. That's the first one in the history of the Detroit Tigers. But that particular night, that's where you should have instant replay. And they keep talking about if you have instant replay, it slows up the game. No. Put a guy up in the booth. When it's a crucial play, do it like they do in football. Ring down there and say, boys, we better look at that one again. The managers don't have to go out and ask. The guy up in the replay booth do it. It ain't going to take 10 seconds to go down there. Let's look at this one again. There may not be a play all night. But if it's a game, every game, you should get it right. I don't care when it is. Now, during the season, you play 162. If it's in July, you're going to have some go against you, some go for you. They're going to even out. But in the playoffs and World Series, you've got to get it right.
All right, so all hell breaks loose in '85 It's one of the most infamous calls ever. You lose that game, you get pounded the next night, 11-0. Andahar goes nuts on the mound. You get thrown out of the game because Dinkinger's got the plate. And you tell him, hey, if you hadn't messed up the other night, we wouldn't be here talking about this now. And he tosses you. But in the end, no hard feelings. You're both baseball lifers. So you bring him back to St. Louis for this banquet, and you have a gift for him, which was very nice.
Yeah, he was very gracious to come back. He got up and spoke, and I had a gift for him. I gave him a Braille watch, and he was laughing about that. He came to the Rogers dinner last winter after I'd been chosen to be elected to the Hall of Fame. And the last thing he said, well, now, he said, I don't have to live with this anymore. Nobody can say I kept Whitey out of the Hall of Fame. So he's a good guy, and it was a human error, and he's a human being. But I'd still say they ought to have instant replay, get it right in the playoffs, the World Series.
What's the funniest thing that ever happened on the diamond? You go out to argue a call, or you go out to the mound to yank the pitcher, and the funniest thing that ever happened?
Well, a lot of things like that. I went out to argue one time at home plate, and you can't argue balls in a strike. And I got so mad at the umpire that I strained my muscles. And I'm trying to argue, and I can't talk. I can't talk. So,
you flabbergasted? Stop the presses.
My voice was gone. Believe me, it was gone. And I finally my veins, I was red, and I walked off, and I said something like I couldn't say anything, but they read my lips, and I said I was gone. and it was funny. I was embarrassed because I couldn't even argue. So anyway, one time I did curse and didn't get kicked out because they couldn't hear me. Now, in the 65 World Series, that's the first time I was ever kicked out of a ball game without using a bad word. When I said to Dank, I said, if you'd have done your job last night, we wouldn't be here. And I was gone. Now, that was terrible. Night.
No profanity, but if you'd done your job right last night.
Yeah. And, of course, I get kicked out in the third, and my pitching was done. Terry was hurt. Daly was hurt. It had nothing out there. Suter hadn't lost since July to the Dodgers. Was finished 22-7, and he got hammered. And Kansas City had a good record against him over the years, even when he was Boston. But John had a marvelous year. And then I had nothing left in the bullpen, so I called the big Dominican up, and I said, Joaquin, I need a favor, buddy. I got to get 3-4 innings out of you. I got nobody left. Okay, Whitey, he said, I'll warm him. So he warms up, and he calls back in. He said, I got good stuff. He said, I can do it. I'll bring him in.
We're still in the fifth. 9-0 Royals. Joaquin Andújar comes in, bats in Landrum's spot.
First pitch is a letter-high fastball, and Dinkinger says, ball. And Joaquin goes, was it high?
Now he's about ready to get tossed out of the game, and somebody better step in a hurry.
Now, Dinkinger hadn't slept. And he's got a lot of criticism and getting criticized all day. I understand that. All he should have done was say yes or no. But he goes out and he talks to Joaquin. And that got me. So I go out there and I said, get your rear end behind the plate and go ahead and umpire the game. Forget about all the other balls. Sure enough, we keep talking, and he says something to me, and I back and forth, and I get kicked out. Because I told him if you'd have done your job last night, we wouldn't be here. We'd be celebrating. Well, the next thing I know, I'm up there watching the game on TV, fourth inning of the World Series. I'd seen enough anyway, 11-0. And, we only scored 14 runs the first 6 games. I didn't think we were going to get 12. But anyway, here comes Joaquin. So here's me and my big, tough Dominican in the fourth inning of the 7th World Series. Sitting up in my office watching the game on TV, drinking a Budweiser. And that was the darndest, longest night I ever had. I was so embarrassed all the things that happened. And to get hammered like that after taking away something we should have won, that was tough.
Whitey's gone. You can see that coming.
Second manager in Major League World Series history to ever get booted out outside of Earl Weaver in 1969 in a World Series game.
And Billy Martin.
This is Studio 42, presented by Travelers. Before Game 7 of the '85 World Series, you're in Kansas City, where you'd lived and managed, and you and George Brett went to see the Kansas City Chiefs play football that afternoon,
right?
And then went and competed against each other that night in Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah, Jamie Quirk and George Brett and I went. Paul Wiggin was the coach, and maybe Levy had taken over, but we sat in this box. We had nice seats, and we ate dinner before I went to the ballpark. And George and I are still very good friends. You know, he canceled a cruise to come to Cooperstown last week because he wanted to come to my induction. But yeah, we did. And then, of course, George didn't help beat us because we kind of beat ourselves a little bit. But he's been a wonderful guy, wonderful ball player. And, you know, he felt bad because when I left there. And we stay in touch, talk to him a lot. And one of my 3 Hall of Famers, I've been very lucky, Bobby, to have him and Ozzie and Bruce.
I remember coming into your office years and years ago, and like everybody else who covered you, I saw you with your charts. You had your own charts, different colored pencils, keeping track of everything. And you have an encyclopedic memory for everything that's happened, and you know all the stats. If you were managing today, you think you'd make use of all these new Moneyball statistics and all the sabermetrics?
You know, Bobby, I guess it's wonderful. I mean, for the press to write about and every announcer to know what he's hitting against this guy, he's getting this guy out and stuff. But I tell you what, I would really not enjoy it as much doing that because I like spending that hour and a half every day charting that game to see where they hit the ball. I wanted those charts to show me where they hit the ball off of my pitchers. And those charts won't show you that. Those charts will show you where they hit the ball. But I want to know where they hit it when Tudor throws the ball right, or when Dennis Leonard throws it right, or, you know, a split arf, or, you know, it's just something that I enjoyed doing. It kept me close to what I was doing. The funny thing now, if you've seen my thing in Cooperstown last week, that's what they wanted, was some of those charts, and I give them about 80 of them. And some of them are in the Hall of Fame.
So you still had them. You saved all your charts.
I saved them. I got them at home, and I told them I was going to burn them. They want me to send them all of them. I got thousands of them, and I got a dead file. And Rick Hummel said, you know, it really is a dead file when he looked at it. About half of them are dead.
But if somebody wants to know how to pitch against a guy, you know, in a game in heaven, you got the info.
Well, if they need a manager up there, maybe they'll call on me. But I always said that, and I said, well, you're going to manage again. I said, well, if the old man needs a manager up in heaven, maybe I'll help him out.
What's it like to play for Whitey Herzog? We'll find out next when another Hall of Famer joins us. This is Studio 42, presented by Travelers.
You know, any time is a good time when you receive an award like this. And I am grateful to the Commissioner's Office, to the people that elected me, to all my buddies back here. I want to be known. I got 3 Hall of Fame players, and if all 3 of them hadn't played for me, I wouldn't be here today. I'd probably be back in New Athens, Illinois, digging ditches or something, but that's the way it would be.
So we're at the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, and we're joined now by one of Whitey Herzog's Hall of Fame players, Ozzie Smith. Interesting circumstance when you joined the Cardinals, because Gary Templeton, at that time in the early 80s, we would have guessed he was on his way to the Hall of Fame. He fell out of favor with Whitey and the Cardinals. You get into some dispute with the Padres, and all of a sudden 2 guys who seemed to be untouchable were available, swapped for each other.
Yeah, it was amazing. You know, at the time, I had a no-trade clause in my contract, so I had a writer. Well, it was Herman. Bob Herman called me and said, "Hey, welcome to St. Louis." And I go, "Who is this?" And he says, "It's Jack Herman from St. Louis, and you've just been traded to the Cardinals." And I go, "Well, I don't know how that's possible, but I guess I'll be hearing about it in the next couple of days." And next couple of days, I got a call from Whitey, who wanted to come out and meet with Ed Gottlieb, who was my agent at the time. And we sat down. I can remember that day very vividly. He sat down. We had a couple pops. And he said to me, he said, "If you come and play for the Cardinals, there's no reason why we can't win it all." And he said, "If you don't like St. Louis and you don't like the team, you can become a free agent." And that was the thing that really kind of freed me up.
I got on a red eye, and I said, "Ozzie, you're making X amount of dollars. I'll pay you $450,000 next year." And at the end of the year, because I knew I was going to release Templeton, I wasn't even going to get him to play the next year. If you don't like me, you get your release. If you don't like St. Louis, you get your release. If you don't like the Cardinal organization, you get your release. Now, if you like the Cardinals or you want to stay, I will sign you to a long-term contract. And that's exactly what happened. But how in the world Ozzie and Denise ever ended up in St. Louis? When they came, they were going to let me know after first year whether they'd do any one of the three. And a gal calls me from the office receptionist, said, Mr. and Mrs. Smith are here. 17 below, chill index. Ozzie and Denise looked like two Eskimos. They had full-length furs. They had Daniel Boone hats with a tail hanging in the back. And I said, there's no way, there's no way.
This story is it's getting bigger as we sit here.
But let me tell you something. I called up Forshee, and it was cold. Ozzie will tell you that. And I said, Forshee, do me a favor. Ozzie and Denise there. Would you and Molly take them out? Have a dinner, show them the homes in Chesterfield where all the ball players are living. Send me everything you spend, and Ozzie's leaving next morning. And he did, and I'm sure they had a good time. And about 3-4 days later, Mr. Gottlieb called, and Ozzie was a Cardinal. And that's how it worked out. But when they came in, I said, why in the world would you agree to no trade clause to come to St. Louis when it's 72 degrees every night in San Diego, and when especially on that miserable day? That's one of the most miserable days we've ever had since I've been living.
Yeah, snow was.
It was bad.
It was bad. It was bad. But you know, at the time, I just felt that it was time for a change. You know, you just get stale in a place, and that had happened for me there. And I certainly wanted to go to a place where I felt wanted, I felt needed, and he presented me with that opportunity.
What made him special to play for?
2 rules: be on time, give 100%. Now, as a professional athlete, that's all you can ask for. Somebody says, all I want you to do is go out there and give me 100% and be on time. Doesn't get any easier than that.
You played for Whitey. You played subsequently for Joe Torre. You played 1 year for Tony La Russa. They'll all be in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
Is he your favorite?
Of course, I have to say no. You know, all three.
Well, the back end of that is a different discussion.
Different
for another
discussion.
time.
But you know, I played the most for Whitey and Joe, and there are no two better gentlemen in the game today. They both were very professional about the way they went about it. You knew what your role was every day with those guys. They were fair. Sometimes, you know, the honesty that this guy gave you, you know, whether you liked it or not, you know, you knew that it was constructive, and if nothing else, it forced you to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, were you the player that you thought you were? And that's the thing that always keeps you on your toes. And you know, some of the things that you guys have talked about, you knew what your role was with Whitey. You knew exactly what your role was. You knew that if a frontline guy went down and you substituted when the frontline guy was back and healthy, that you were going to be back in your role. And the guys agreed with that, and they understood that, and that's what made it so easy to come to the ballpark every day.
He was always so honest. I guess with you guys behind closed doors, certainly with us in the press. And he'd be funny about it, too. You'd ask him, you know, how about your ball club? He said, well, you know, we're only a couple players away. Unfortunately, those players are Ruth and Koufax, you know, or some combination of those two things. And when Mr. Bush, who owned the ball club, asked you for an assessment when he brought you aboard, you basically told him, we're horse bleep. We're terrible. We'll never win anything. We got to change the whole team.
Right. We were third in the league in baseball and payroll, had 3 of the top 10 salaries. And we were last. And I said, well, you got a bunch of overpaid prima donnas that are never going to win anything, and what do you want to do? And I said, well, we're going to tear it apart. I want to get the scouts in here. I want to go start building an organization for speed in this ballpark. And I said, we're going to put defense together. See, what people don't realize, Bobby, when you have a ballpark, and it's not going to happen anymore, but speed is the only thing in baseball that helps you on both sides of the ball. And you can use speed to your advantage offensively and defensively. And people not only talking about our infield, because that was one of the greatest defensive infields in the 82 in the history of the game. I don't care who they say. I've seen a lot of them. That was one of the best. I don't know how many double ground ball singles we turned into double plays, and that was big. But in the outfield, on our big dimensions, 450 to center, 385 in the gaps, and 345 or 50 down the lines, we could cut those balls off, hold them to singles. And the other opposition, those clunkers, they go for triples, sometimes home runs. And that's why we could win. We could neutralize the other teams far. But if you look at our record, there were 6 AstroTurf teams out of 12. Then you played the Dodgers, fast as AstroTurf, and you played at San Diego, fast as AstroTurf. So we had eight ballparks in the National League with lightning-fast infields, and we could take advantage of that. And that's why, if you check it out, check the won-and-loss percentage on the home and on the road, and we played just about as well both places.
One of Whitey's lines through the years was, every year we tried to beat Maris's record. As a team.
As a team.
See if you could hit more than 61 homers as a team. Now, the game has changed back, and I think most of us are grateful for that. It's changed back quite a bit in the last few years after the worst of the steroid era. But we're still not at a point, and may never be again, where speed and defense matter as much as they did when you were in your prime. You missed that?
Well, you know, one of the things, Bob, that I hear all the time, they say Whitey ball. And I term Whitey ball as nothing more than sound, fundamental baseball, the way the game should be played. And, you know, I think that it has a lot to do with the way the leagues are built. I think the American League is built from an offensive standpoint. You know, one of the things we talk about today is that you don't take infield. Well, you know, when you're thinking about hitting the ball out of the ballpark, well, you're not worried about taking infield. Infield is always a way to get yourself ready to play. And you go to ballparks today, they don't even take infield anymore, which is a very, very important part of what successful clubs are built on. So, you know, I think that we've seen a turn here. It's not back to where it was, but I think people are getting a better understanding of how you build a ball club. If you build it from an offensive standpoint, then you're going to be lacking in an area, and that usually is defense. And so teams that are built from a defensive standpoint are teams that stand the test of time.
After several years in the big leagues, Ozzie Smith had never hit a home run left-handed until he hit one of the most memorable round trippers in baseball history.
He supplied the power, I supplied the technique, and history was made.
That's next on Studio 42, presented by Travelers. Before you joined us, we were talking about that 85 World Series and that crushing defeat. And anytime you lose in a World Series, it's tough. But that whole season, the Cardinals had played an electrifying brand of baseball. You weren't just on the verge of a championship. You were on the verge of putting a ribbon on a nearly perfect season. And then it slipped away.
Yeah.
Do you still think about it?
Well, not as much as you did when it first happened. You know, you realize that we can't go back. It's an opportunity missed. And, yeah, was it disappointing? Very disappointing for all of us because, you know, I think that we were kind of crawling to the finish line. You know, we were all worn out physically and mentally, and it was a struggle. And I think that up until that point of Game 6, we had won every game where we led going into the 8th inning. And that's what was disappointing. We were not able to finish it, but we kind of self-destructed a little bit too. You know, we got away from what it was that made us successful.
How did that happen?
Fatigue, mentally and physically. I think it just all came down on us. That Game 6, we had thrown everything that we had into that Game 6, and knowing that, you know, if we had that lead going into the 8th inning, we were usually able to close the door, you know. So it was that little mental fatigue and stuff that I think that took over at that point once we lost that game.
Only a week, 2 weeks before that, Ozzie had one of the great moments in his career. You can't claim any credit. I know you didn't say, boys, Ozzie's going to go up there left-handed, and he's going to hit one out of the park off Tom Niedenfuhr, and we're going to go home.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. When Jack made that announcement and we won that game, and he hit that homer, the press come in my room, and they said, did it surprise you? I said, surprised me. I said, he was due.
NBC put a graphic up. It's one of the great moments in television history. Ozzie Smith, I forget the exact number of at-bats, but it was thousands.
3,000 something.
Has never homered in X number of at-bats left-handed. Next pitch, bam.
meant to be.
Go crazy, folks.
I tell Hank and all those guys, you guys hit all those home runs and stuff. It's about timing. And that, it appears to me now that it seemed like to me, I've hit 500 home runs. I've heard that so many times and watched that particular series of pitches.
Now here's a question. You'd never hit one left-handed in a big league game. Did you know it was gone when you hit it?
No. Did you see me running?
Yeah.
No, I was on board. In 1985, it all kind of came together for me from an offensive and defensive standpoint. I think the team had come to a point to where they were depending on me for as much offense as they were defense. And I'd learned to pull the ball. I'd gotten a lot stronger. I'd worked with Mackie Shilstone. So I was just trying to get myself in scoring position, trying to get that ball down in the corner. Yes, get in scoring position. And lo and behold, he supplied the power, I supplied the technique, and history was made.
Smith corks one into right, down the line. It may go. Go crazy, folks. Go crazy. It's a home run, and the Cardinals have won the game by the score of 3-2 on a home run by the Wizard. Go crazy.
This is Studio 42, presented by Travelers. Here's something I just learned. Your grandson is playing for Gary Templeton in the minor leagues. A guy you literally pulled by his shirt off the field down into the dugout when you were displeased by his antics, and if people hadn't come between you, the two of you probably would have gone at it right there. You exiled him from St. Louis, brought in Ozzie Smith. Now your grandson plays for him. How's that working out?
This is funny, I've been after my grandson to quit playing, going back, finish college, and getting on with his life. And he loves baseball. And he really is not going to play in the big leagues. He's a wonderful boy. He couldn't have a better grandson. And last year he played up in New Jersey for Hal Lanier, and he was telling me about Hal, and I said, I know. And this year he ends up playing Chichi, California for Gary. And I called him up, and I said, John, don't tell him you're my grandson. I said, you might be home tomorrow. But anyway, that relationship's been good. Yeah, Gary's been very good. He's coming into Cooperstown. Gary's giving him off till Monday. He flies into Canada somewhere to play. And Gary's put his life back together. He had a tough time. That wasn't what happened here in St. Louis. Wasn't Gary Templeton. There was a lot of people having that same problem at those times. Something unfortunate that happened in his life. But he put his career back together. They won a pennant in San Diego with him at shortstop, and I'm happy that he enjoys managing and doing a lot of good things for young children.
And, some of the pressure that he put on me, when you get traded for a player of his caliber, whom I've always looked at as being probably the most talented shortstop that I've ever seen wear a pair of spikes.
Switch hitter, could hit, run, field, great range, arm.
I mean, he had it all. And, it was a blessing for me having the opportunity to come over here and play. But, I'm not so sure that if things hadn't been different, that you wouldn't be sitting here talking to him instead of me.
When you get together with Whitey, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see Whitey?
Well, first of all, he always called me the midget.
That is just uncalled for. From my perspective, that is truly uncalled for. Yeah, that is just wrong.
But no, all of the good times that we've had, and I can't thank him enough for the opportunity that he afforded me and my family, and it changed my life.
What's the funniest thing that ever happened? He likes to talk. In the dugout, would he talk?
Well, he's always talking, as you know. There's always something going on, but we always had great moments at the mound. He'd come out to the mound, and he'd look at me, and I'd look at him, and we'd shake our heads and stuff. Especially when we knew guys didn't have what it was going to take for us to win, you know. And you could always tell that. And that was one of the great things about him. What he would do is he would throw a guy in the fire right away to find out what he was made of. And if a guy went out there, even if he didn't win, if he showed what it took to win, then, we kept that guy. And he gained his respect and his confidence, and he'd throw him right back out there in the fire again.
What about the time we got that underarm relief pitcher Keener, and he joined us in Montreal. I bring him in the 4th inning, bases loaded, Andre Dawson hitting 2-0. What do you think when he got out of the bullpen cart, what do you think I told him? Throw strikes. 2-0, bases loaded. And Andre ripped one over the third base bag for a base clearing double. And I said, man, I hope I didn't kill that kid doing that. But I figured he hadn't seen him. He threw around. He might get a double play. That's why I brought him in. And he didn't last long in the big league. He was a little short. But I felt bad that night. I didn't say I made a bad move. I just really put the kid in a terrible situation. You know?
Joe McGrain tells this story. As a rookie, you give him the start in Game 7 of the World Series against Minnesota. And he's got a 2-1 lead in the 6th inning. And Kirby comes up, left-handed pitcher, right? You got to get him out of there, okay? So you bring in Danny Cox. But the way he tells the story, he's trying to argue you out of it. He's a cocky kid, even though he's a rookie. He's trying to argue you out of it. And you had told him before the game, if you pitch a shutout, I'll get the old man, Mr. Bush, to buy you a Porsche. Now, McGrain says that as you're taking the ball, he says, look, if we win the game, do I still get the car? And you say, get the bleep out of here.
You know, the best conversation I ever had with a pitcher was in the '85 World Series when LaPointe was pitching a great game. And it's in the 5th inning in Milwaukee, and we got a 4-0 lead, 2 outs. And the first baseman who managed Houston last year, very good player, hits a ground ball to Hernandez, and he throws a perfect.
Oh, you mean 82, 19, you said 85,
82. So it was a perfect strike to Snacks. I call him Snacks because he played golf. He had 2 6-packs, 4 sandwiches, and ordered a turkey, roast beef after the game. So that was his nickname. So anyway, he drops the ball, and all hell broke loose. Believe me, Bobby, you couldn't help. I mean, everybody I brought in Bear, I brought in Cott, I brought in everybody. Next thing you know, we're down 6-4. I can't go any longer with Snacks, and then really his fault was all runs on an earned, but they're not really smoking him, but we lost our lead. So I go out to take him out, and he looks at me, David's really a comedian. And I said, you know, Snacks, if that had been a hamburger, you wouldn't have dropped it. You hear me say that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, it was one of my favorites. Predates your time with him. Alex Johnson was a really good player in the 70s, moody guy.
And I had him at Texas.
Texas, yeah. He won the batting title once or twice.
Played with the Dodgers, too, didn't he?
Yeah, so Alex Johnson comes over, and the press asks, why do you got Alex Johnson? And he says, yeah, you know, I realize this is the kind of guy that could poison a ball club. But how could you possibly poison this club?
And then I said, they're Texas Rangers. They ought to be called the Texas Strangers. My players got a kick out of that.
Any final thoughts? I'm out of questions.
The Texas Strangers. That would have made a good club.
Yeah, we were pretty good.
Hall of Famers both. Whitey Herzog, Ozzie Smith. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, folks.
You know, when you have something like this happen to you, I got a great family, and the reason I got out of baseball when I did, I want to spend a little time with them. Every question that anybody asks me is this: what's it feel like to be a Hall of Famer? Well, I didn't know. I kept saying, I won't know till July 25th. Well, now I can tell you what it feels like. Being elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, is like going to heaven before you die. Thank you very much.
This has been a presentation of MLB Network Studio.